was on a solo road trip through the Midwest, chasing sunsets and wide-open highways, when fatigue hit me like a brick wall. You know that moment when your eyes just can't stay open any longer? I found myself pulling off into a small town I'd never heard of. It was late, and the only place that seemed to be open was a dingy, barely lit establishment called Whispering Pines Motel. The irony wasn't lost on me. The place didn't have a single tree, let alone pines, and the only thing whispering were the wind and my own doubts. The lobby was like stepping back in time, faded floral wallpaper, a clunky rotary phone, and a bell at the counter. I rang it, and after what felt like an eternity, an older woman with a pinched expression shuffled out. She looked like she hadn't slept in days or maybe years. She handed me a key, an actual key, not a card, and mumbled something about keeping the noise down. Who was making noise in a nearly empty motel? I found my room at the end of a long, dimly lit corridor. The door creaked open, revealing a small, grim room. The bedspread was an ugly, outdated pattern, and the carpet looked like it had seen better days, decades ago. The only light came from a flickering lamp in the corner, casting long, eerie shadows. I shrugged it off, telling myself I just needed a place to crash for the night. No big deal, right? As I settled in, I noticed a faint sound, like whispers, coming from the air vent. At first, I thought it was the wind playing tricks, but as I listened closer, it became unmistakable. It was a conversation, hushed and hurried, but I couldn't make out the words. My skin prickled, and a chill ran down my spine. The voices seemed to grow louder, more urgent, as if they were trying to tell me something important. Then, a sudden knock on the door made me jump out of my skin. I hesitated for a moment, then opened it a crack. No one was there, just an empty hallway stretching into darkness. I felt a surge of adrenaline, a primal urge to get the hell out of there, but my curiosity kept me rooted to the spot. I peered into the vent, and for a split second I thought I saw something. A flash of movement, a shadow darting away. I shut the door, locked it, and pushed a chair against it for good measure. My heart was pounding, and I tried to convince myself it was all in my head. Maybe I was just exhausted, and my mind was playing tricks on me. But then the whispers returned, louder this time, almost frantic. I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my phone to call the front desk, but there was no signal. Typical. I decided to confront whatever was happening head on. I yanked the vent cover off and shone my flashlight inside. Nothing, just dust and darkness. But as I pulled back, I felt something cold and clammy touch my hand. I screamed, dropping the flashlight. The room plunged into darkness, and the whispers rose to a fever pitch. I scrambled for the light, heart racing, and shone it wildly around the room. Nothing was there, but I could still hear the whispers, now right behind me. I bolted for the door, grabbed my bag, and didn't look back. As I sped away, I glanced in the rearview mirror and could have sworn I saw a shadowy figure standing in the window of my room watching me leave. It was supposed to be a romantic getaway. My partner, Amy, and I had planned this trip to rekindle our relationship, which had been on the rocks for a while. We chose a quaint little town in the mountains, far from the chaos of city life. The drive up was picturesque, with winding roads and lush forests. We booked a room at Mountain View Lodge, a charming place with a stunning view of the valley below. At least, that's what the brochure said. When we arrived, the place looked decent enough from the outside, albeit a bit more rustic than we expected. The lobby was small but cozy, with a stone fireplace crackling away. The receptionist was a young man who barely looked up from his computer screen as he handed us the key, another old-fashioned metal key. He mentioned we had been upgraded to the luxury suite, which sounded promising. A suite? Lucky us. The room was at the end of a long corridor. As we walked down the hallway, I noticed the air felt colder and the lights flickered slightly. Old wiring, I thought. When we opened the door to our suite, we were met with a surprisingly spacious room. There was a king-sized bed, a small kitchenette, and a large window with a view of the forest. But something felt off. The air was thick, heavy, like the room hadn't been aired out in ages. The first night started innocently enough. We unpacked, had a bottle of wine, and tried to relax. But then, around midnight, Amy woke me up. She said she heard someone crying. I listened, and sure enough, there it was, a soft, muffled sobbing. It seemed to be coming from the walls. My first thought was that it was coming from another room, but when I pressed my ear to the wall, it felt closer, almost as if it was coming from inside the room. We tried to ignore it, chalking it up to the wind or the building settling. But then the temperature dropped suddenly. It was like someone had opened a freezer door. Amy huddled closer to me, shivering. The crying grew louder, now mixed with whispers. We were both wide awake, clutching each other, listening to the eerie sounds. And then, as if on cue, the crying stopped. Dead silence filled the room, so thick you could almost feel it. We tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a prank or some weird acoustics. But as I went to close the window, which was already shut, I saw something out of the corner of my eye. A figure, pale and indistinct, standing just outside the window, staring in. My heart jumped into my throat. I pulled Amy back, pointing to the window. But when she looked, the figure was gone. We spent the rest of the night with the lights on, barely speaking, too terrified to sleep. At dawn, we decided to check out, feeling foolish but too spooked to stay another minute. When we told the receptionist about our experience, he didn't seem surprised. He leaned in, lowering his voice, and told us the suite had been closed off for years due to unexplainable occurrences. He mentioned almost casually that a woman had died in that room under mysterious circumstances. Rumor had it she was a bride-to-be who had been jilted at the altar. The crying? Likely her, they said. Some guests reported seeing her wandering the halls, looking for her lost love. Needless to say, we grabbed our bags and left as fast as we could. We never spoke about that night again, but the memory of that pale figure still haunts me. I was driving cross-country, making good time on my way to visit an old college friend. The journey had been smooth until I hit a stretch of road that seemed to go on forever without a single gas station or rest stop. Just as I started to worry about running low on fuel, I spotted a flickering neon sign in the distance. Highway Haven Motel. It looked like a relic from the 1960s, complete with a retro sign that promised color TV and air conditioning. It wasn't ideal, but it would do for the night. The motel was situated just off a desolate stretch of highway, surrounded by overgrown bushes and trees. It had a handful of rooms, each with peeling paint and cracked windows. I pulled into the gravel lot, noting the lack of other cars. It felt like I was the only person for miles, which should have been a red flag, but I was too tired to care. I went to the front desk, where a portly, middle-aged man with an unkempt beard greeted me. He seemed friendly enough, though his eyes had a strange, far-off look. He handed me a key and muttered something about not wandering around at night. The room was basic, but clean enough. It had a single bed, a tiny TV bolted to the wall, and a small bathroom. I dumped my bag on the bed and went to wash up. As I splashed water on my face, I heard a soft thud. Startled, I looked around, but there was nothing out of place. Just my nerves, I thought. The long drive was getting to me. I settled into bed, hoping to get some rest. As I flicked through the channels on the ancient TV, I heard it again, a dull, repetitive thudding sound, like something hitting the wall. It was coming from the room next door. "Great," I muttered, annoyed at the thought of noisy neighbors. I turned up the volume on the TV to drown out the noise, but the thudding continued, growing louder and more insistent. Curiosity got the better of me. I decided to go next door and politely ask whoever it was to keep it down. I stepped outside, the cold night air hitting me as I walked over to the neighboring room. I knocked, but there was no answer. The door was slightly ajar, creaking open with a gentle push. The room inside was dark, save for the faint light from a lamp on the nightstand. "Hello," I called out, stepping inside. The room was empty, but it looked like someone had left in a hurry. The bed was unmade, and the closet door was wide open. Then I noticed it, a large wet stain on the carpet right next to the bed. My stomach churned. Something about it felt off, and a chill ran down my spine. I quickly backed out of the room and closed the door, deciding it was none of my business. As I turned to leave, I glanced at the room number, 13. Of course. I went back to my room, locking the door behind me. But the thudding noise continued, louder than before, now accompanied by a low, muffled moan. My heart pounded as I realized it was coming from beneath me. I pulled the thin carpet aside and found a small trapdoor in the floor. My hand trembled as I opened it, revealing a narrow staircase leading down into darkness. At the bottom, I could make out a faint light and what sounded like someone crying. I froze, unsure whether to investigate or flee. Before I could decide, the lights in my room flickered and went out, plunging me into darkness. With a surge of adrenaline, I slammed the trapdoor shut and grabbed my bag. I bolted out of the room, not bothering to check out. As I sped away, I glanced back at the motel in my rearview mirror. There, standing in the doorway of room 13, was a shadowy figure watching me leave. I never found out what was in that basement, and I'm not sure I want to know. But one thing's for sure, some places are haunted, not just by spirits, but by the secrets they keep buried. If you want to see more horror stories, check out my next video.